Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every comment helps these disturbing stories find their way back to you. Now, let's step into the darkness. When I think back to that day, I still remember the sound of the gravel under the tires more than anything else. It was a kind of crunch that didn't echo right. Too soft, too wet. Like the earth itself didn't want to make noise. My name's Dylan Mercer, and what happened out there near Coos Bay still plays in my head every time I see fog hanging low over a tree line. Back in 2019, I was 23, broke, and stupidly brave, in the way only small-town people get when they grow up around danger and convince themselves it's normal. That fall, my friend Caleb Dunn told me about an old logging site out past milepost 17, a forgotten patch of forest where an abandoned mill still stood rusting into the ground. He said there were trucks up there, old machinery, and that one of the guys he worked for was paying cash for scrap. It sounded simple. Drive up, cut out what we could, load it, leave. We weren't the type to think twice. We left town at dawn, the fog still thick enough to blur the tree line into one gray sheet. The forest up there is different. The air tastes like wet bark and diesel, and every sound disappears faster than it should. By the time we turned off Highway 38, we hadn't seen another car in 10 miles. The road narrowed, turning into dirt, then into mud. There were puddles deep enough to swallow tires, branches hanging low like skeletal arms, and moss eating the road signs until the words were just shadows. Caleb laughed and said, "You sure you remember how to get up here?" "Straight till the gate," I said. "That's what your boss said, right?" "Yeah, just keep an eye out for the old mill fence. He said it's chained but busted." About 5 miles in, we passed a set of tire tracks that didn't belong there. They were clean, narrow, and recent, from something like a sedan or a small SUV. Nobody in their right mind would drive a car up here. Caleb noticed it too, but shrugged it off. "Maybe hunters," he said, "or surveyors." I didn't answer. There was something too neat about those tracks, like whoever left them hadn't slipped once. A mile later, the fog thickened until it felt like we were driving inside a cloud. That's when we saw something hanging from a low branch off the right side of the road. A blue flannel shirt, soaked and shredded, swaying gently in the mist. Caleb leaned forward. "That's weird." I slowed to a crawl. The sleeves were tied together in a knot, looped around the branch like someone had hung it there intentionally. The shirt was crusted with something dark. Mud, maybe, but the color was wrong. Caleb muttered, "Let's just keep going, man." I was about to hit the gas when I caught a smell through the open vent. Sweet, foul, unmistakably human. We both went silent. A few feet beyond the tree, the soil was turned over, darker than the rest. It wasn't just a patch of wet ground. It was freshly dug. Caleb whispered, "That's not an animal, is it?" I didn't answer. There were no birds, no crickets, not even wind. Just that low, wet quiet that makes your heartbeat sound too loud in your ears. Then through the fog, a faint hum began to rise, like an engine somewhere nearby, revving softly. It wasn't ours. I killed the truck's engine instantly, and the silence that followed was even worse. The sound came again, closer now, maybe 100 yards away. Caleb turned, voice barely above a whisper. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I said. We sat frozen, staring at the gray blur of trees ahead. Then, between the trunks, I caught the briefest flash of red. A car. It was small, a hatchback maybe, and parked off the road, half covered by fog. The headlights were off, but the driver's door was open. Caleb said, "Someone beat us here." The idea didn't make sense. No one had been here for years. The gate alone should have kept out anything smaller than a pickup. He pulled his phone from his pocket. No bars, of course, then shoved it back in. "Let's just check the site, grab what we can, and get the hell out." I didn't move. My gut told me that whatever was buried under that tree and whoever owned that red car were connected. But Caleb was already out of the truck, grabbing a crowbar from the bed. 5 minutes, he said. If we see anything off, we go. The fog closed around him as he moved ahead, the beam of his flashlight bobbing faintly through the gray. I followed, keeping low, eyes scanning the sides of the road. That's when I saw footprints. 2 sets leading from the parked car toward the woods. One set deeper, longer strides, the other smaller, erratic, like whoever it was had been pulled or pushed. Caleb's voice came through the fog. Over here. I jogged up and found him crouched near a ditch, pointing his light at something in the mud. It took me a second to realize what I was seeing. A rusted toolbox, its handle snapped, half buried in the muck. Inside, tangled in old cables, was a cracked phone screen, still faintly glowing. He reached for it, but I grabbed his arm. Don't. It's someone's phone, man. They could be hurt. They're not here. As if on cue, an engine roared to life behind us. The red car. Caleb spun around. You see that? Through the fog, the headlights flared on, high beams slicing through the trees like knives. It didn't move. It just sat there, engine idling, lights glaring directly at us. Caleb called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response. He took a step forward, and I grabbed his jacket. Don't go near it. But he kept walking, flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. Then, without warning, the lights shut off. Total darkness. A second later, the sound of footsteps came from behind us, fast, heavy, splashing through the mud. I swung the flashlight around, catching only glimpses. A shoulder, a hood, movement darting between the trees. Caleb shouted, "Dylan." I turned, but he was already gone. Only his flashlight lay in the ditch, still on, beam pointed up into the fog like a flare. The car's engine revved again, this time closer. I bolted for the truck, slipping in the mud, heart hammering so loud it drowned everything else out. When I reached it, I could barely get the keys in the ignition. As soon as the engine started, the high beams hit me again. That same red car, now facing me head-on, no more than 20 feet away. The driver's window was down, but I couldn't see inside. I slammed the gear into reverse, gunned it, and spun the wheel. The truck fishtailed violently, tires clawing through mud as I tore backward down the narrow road. The red car stayed still at first, then slowly began to follow. Headlights off this time, engine whispering through the fog like it was breathing down my neck. I shouted Caleb's name again and again, but the forest swallowed it whole. When I hit the first bend in the road, I saw something through the side mirror, just for a second, and it froze my blood. A man, standing in the middle of the road where the car had been, holding Caleb's flashlight, and pointing it straight at me. The light from Caleb's flashlight burned into my rearview mirror until the curve of the road swallowed it whole. After that, there was only fog, thick, gray, endless, and the sound of my own tires sliding over mud. I didn't stop driving for what felt like miles. Every turn looked the same. Every patch of forest mirrored the last. It was like the road was looping back on itself. At some point, I realized I'd lost all sense of direction. The gas gauge hovered just above empty. I slowed to a crawl, headlights dimmed, and rolled down the window. The air smelled like wet iron and pine. Somewhere far off, I could still hear an engine idling, a low mechanical hum that kept fading in and out, like whoever was out there wanted me to know they hadn't gone far. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I couldn't just keep driving blind. I had to find Caleb. Against every instinct screaming not to, I turned the truck around. The fog was thicker now, but I could still make out the faint glimmer of his flashlight beam bouncing in the distance. It was lying on the road, still shining through the mist. I pulled up slow, headlights washing over the spot where he'd dropped it. The ground around the ditch was torn up, boot prints, drag marks, and streaks where something heavy had been pulled toward the trees. I killed the engine and listened. Somewhere ahead, I heard it. A muffled voice, too quiet to make out words, but it sounded like Caleb, or someone pretending to be him. "Dylan. Hey, over here." It was close, maybe 50 yards into the tree line. I grabbed the crowbar from the back seat and stepped into the woods. Every step sank into wet moss. Branches brushed my shoulders. The fog was thick enough to make the beam from my phone flashlight look like milk. "Caleb," I whispered. No answer. Then crack. A branch snapped to my left. I turned fast, swinging the light around. For half a second, I saw a shape, tall, wearing a hood, face hidden. He didn't move, didn't flinch when I shouted. Just stood there, like he was studying me. Then he slowly raised one arm and pointed deeper into the forest. My chest tightened. Behind him, faint and rhythmic, came another sound, metal scraping against metal, like a gate being dragged open. I stepped backward toward the road, trying not to trip. The man lowered his arm but stayed exactly where he was, half dissolved by fog. When I reached the ditch again, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A trail of rope, thin, green, half buried in mud, leading from the ditch straight toward the trees. I followed it with my eyes and realized where it went. Straight toward the direction of that metallic sound. The mill. Caleb had mentioned it was up here somewhere, maybe a mile past the bend. I didn't think anyone could still get through. The main gate was supposed to be welded shut, but that scraping sound said otherwise. And if that man had taken him, that's where he'd be. I jumped back into the truck and floored it, headlights cutting through fog and drizzle until the forest opened up. The road curved sharply and spat me out into a wide gravel clearing, surrounded by rusted steel buildings. The old Barker Mill, abandoned since the late 90s, still loomed like a carcass over the valley. Half the siding was gone, and the roof sagged inward. A few broken windows glowed faintly with the reflected light from my truck. And right at the gate was the red hatchback. Engine running, driver's door open. I parked about 30 feet back, keeping my lights aimed straight at it. No one inside. The rope from the ditch trailed under the car, disappearing through the open gate into the dark of the mill. I stepped out, keeping the crowbar tight in my hand. My boots sank into oil-soaked mud, the smell of rust and rot heavy in the air. Every few seconds, a gust of wind rattled the sheet metal, making the whole place sound alive. Inside, the mill was worse. Machinery towered over me like skeletons. Old hooks hung from ceiling tracks. The floor was slick with grease and rainwater dripping through holes in the roof. Somewhere ahead, that scraping metal sound started again. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the corridor. I followed it until I reached what used to be the loading bay. My flashlight swept over walls covered in graffiti and dark stains that weren't quite rust. Then I saw movement near one of the pillars. It was Caleb. He was slumped on the ground, tied to the base of the column with rope around his wrists and ankles. His head hung low, and his shirt was torn open at the shoulder. I ran to him, dropped to my knees, and shook his shoulder. "Caleb, it's me." He looked up slowly. His face was pale, lips trembling. "Dylan." His voice cracked. "He's still here." Before I could answer, something behind me clanged, metal on metal, and the gate I'd come through slammed shut. The sound echoed through the mill, long and hollow. Caleb's eyes widened. He locks it from the outside. "What?" "He brings people here." His voice was shaking. "He waits till dark. Then he..." A shadow passed between us and the truck's headlights, blocking the light. I froze. The man stepped into view. Tall, same rain jacket, hood up. His boots crunched on broken glass as he walked closer. He wasn't rushing, just pacing toward us, steady and sure, like this was all a routine he'd practiced. I stood, crowbar raised. He stopped 10 feet away, just far enough that I couldn't see his face. "Why?" I asked. "What do you want?" He tilted his head slightly, like the question confused him. Then, in a calm, even voice, he said, "It's clean here. No one looks." The words hit like static in my ears. Caleb whispered, "He said that to me too." The man stepped closer. That's when I saw what he was holding. An old logging hook, the kind used to drag timber sharpened to a point. I swung first. The crowbar connected with his arm, but he didn't make a sound. He just staggered back, then came forward again faster. The next few seconds blurred. The sound of boots on metal, Caleb yelling, my flashlight spinning away across the floor. I remember slamming into the pillar, pain bursting up my shoulder, then swinging blindly again and again until something heavy hit the ground. When the echo faded, I was gasping for air, staring at a dark smear spreading across the floor. The man wasn't moving. I dropped the crowbar, stumbled to Caleb, and started cutting the ropes with the hook I'd taken from the guy's hand. He was shaking so bad he could barely stand, but we made it to the truck. The headlights were still on, fog rolling in around the beams like smoke. As I threw it into gear, Caleb turned to me and said, "There's more." "What?" He pointed back toward the mill. He wasn't alone. He said, "They come at night." I didn't wait to ask who they were. I hit the gas, tearing down the road until the forest swallowed the building behind us. We didn't speak again until the highway lights finally appeared through the fog. Caleb just stared out the window, breathing hard. His wrists were raw where the rope had cut into them. "You think he's dead?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure. Because when I glanced at the side mirror one last time, there was a shape standing in the fog at the bend of the road, tall, motionless, holding something long and metallic in one hand. The beam of my taillights flashed over him for just a second. He raised his arm and pointed straight at us. I'd always liked traveling alone. There's a quiet you get on long drives that you can't find anywhere else. No voices, no expectations, just the hum of tires and the rhythm of rain. In early 2022, I booked a cheap cabin on the Washington coast near a town called Ocean Park. I'd been freelancing from home for too long, and I needed a few days away from screens. The listing said, "Secluded oceanfront cabin, perfect for writers." It was half the usual rate because it was winter. The photos looked harmless. Wood paneling, stone fireplace, a deck that faced a wall of pines. The kind of place where you imagine quiet mornings, and coffee with the sound of rain on the roof. It wasn't until I got there that I realized how far secluded really meant. The last 3 miles of the drive were pure mud and gravel, winding between dunes and half-collapsed fences. No cell service, no other houses, just the sea somewhere beyond the trees. The cabin itself stood on a narrow bluff, maybe 50 yards from the beach. It had one bedroom, a kitchenette, and a glass sliding door that opened to the deck. The ocean was gray, restless, invisible through mist. I arrived just before sunset. The air smelled like salt and pine sap. Inside, everything was neat but impersonal. Someone had tried to make it cozy, blankets, candles, even a little note on the counter that said, "Welcome. Wi-Fi is spotty, but there's a landline for emergencies." The landline sat on the wall next to the fridge. It was one of those old rotary phones, oddly heavy, with a thick black cord. I remember thinking it looked too old to actually work. That first night, I lit a fire, opened a beer, and watched the tide roll in through the glass door. There was a kind of peace in being cut off from everything, until I noticed the light. It was faint at first, a distant flicker down on the beach. I thought it might have been a flashlight, but it wasn't moving right. It would appear for a few seconds, vanish, then come back a little closer. At first, I thought maybe another guest was staying nearby, but there were no other rentals in sight. By the time I stood up to look closer, the light was gone. I tried to brush it off. Maybe someone walking their dog, maybe kids camping in the dunes. But something about it bothered me. It wasn't the movement. It was the rhythm. The light had blinked 3 times, paused, then blinked again. Precise. Intentional. I shut the curtains and told myself not to think about it. Around midnight, the wind picked up hard. The cabin creaked like an old ship. I couldn't sleep, so I went to make tea. That's when I noticed something I swear hadn't been there before. Footprints on the deck outside the glass door. Bare footprints. They led from the railing right up to the door, and then stopped. No retreating steps, just a pair of wet prints, like someone had been standing there, watching. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I grabbed the fire poker and walked to the door. The fog outside was dense enough to blur everything beyond the porch light. "Hello?" I said, loud enough to be heard over the wind. No answer. I stepped closer to the glass. The reflection of my own face stared back, until something behind it moved. A figure, faint and pale, walking past the deck rail toward the corner of the cabin. I lunged forward and yanked the curtain closed. The wind howled louder. I checked the door. Locked. Checked the front. Locked. Then I remembered the tiny back window in the bedroom. It had no latch, just an old sliding pane. When I got there, it was open 2 inches. The curtains fluttered slightly with the draft. I shut it fast, slid the dresser against it, and sat on the bed with the poker still in my hand. That's when the phone rang. The old rotary phone on the wall. I jumped. The sound was shrill and ancient, cutting through the storm. I let it ring twice, then picked it up. Hello? Static. Then a man's voice. Calm, quiet, too close to the receiver. Don't turn off the light. The line clicked dead. I stood there shaking, the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. I ran to the front window and looked out. The deck light flickered once, twice, and went dark. The storm swallowed the cabin. I hit the switch by the door, but the power was gone. The only light left came from the fire. I could hear the wind outside, but underneath it was another sound, softer, wetter. Footsteps on wood. The deckboards creaked. I held my breath, standing by the cold hearth, watching the orange glow ripple across the room. The footsteps circled the cabin once, slow and deliberate, stopping every few seconds. Then, 3 soft knocks on the glass door. Not loud, just testing. Knock. 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 I didn't move. After that, nothing. The wind screamed, and I waited for an hour that felt like 10. No more sounds. When I finally dared to look out, the footprints on the deck were gone. But the landline light, tiny and red, was still blinking. It had another voicemail. I pressed play. The recording was faint, drowned by static and ocean wind, but I could make out one thing, a man's voice whispering, "You left the back window open." The message ended with a click that seemed to echo through the whole cabin. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear long after the line went dead, listening for any trace of a voice. Nothing but the wind and the slow tick of cooling logs from the fireplace. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the poker across my lap and waited for daylight to seep in through the curtains. Every gust made the roof groan. Every shift of the chimney sounded like someone dragging their hand along the siding. When the gray morning finally came, the world outside looked clean and harmless again. The fog had lifted just enough to show the dunes and the strip of beach below. For a few minutes, I could almost believe I'd imagined it all. Then I saw the footprints. They started at the bottom of the deck stairs and went down toward the beach, bare feet, the same size, pressed deep in the sand. They weren't there the night before. Whoever had been outside had stayed until dawn. I packed my duffel in 10 minutes. The road was a swamp, but I didn't care if I got stuck. I just wanted to get back to pavement. Before I left, I decided to call the rental owner, a woman named Kara Hensley. The listing had her number in the welcome note. The landline dial clicked as I spun each number. It rang twice, then a voice answered. Female, shaky. Hello? Hi, this is Dylan. I'm at your cabin in Ocean Park. Someone was outside last night. She cut me off. You're there now? Yes. I'm leaving, but I thought you should get out, she said. Her voice cracked like she'd been holding her breath. If you're inside, don't touch anything. Just get in your car and drive. I froze. Why? What's going on? She didn't answer at first. I could hear her breathing, fast and uneven. Then very quietly. That property isn't supposed to be listed anymore. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. The red message light blinked twice, then shut off on its own. For the first time since I'd arrived, I noticed how cold it was inside, like the heat had been off all night. I stepped toward the door, reached for my keys on the counter, and stopped. The key ring wasn't there. I scanned the counter, the table, the couch. Gone. My stomach dropped. I remembered setting them down after locking the front door the night before. They couldn't just vanish. Then, from outside, a faint metallic rattle. I looked out through the side window and saw my truck. The driver's door was open. The wind gusted hard enough to slam the cabin shutters, but that door didn't move. It hung perfectly still. I gripped the poker tighter, stepped onto the porch, and called out, "Hey, whoever you are, I called the cops." The bluff was empty. The ocean churned below, endless and gray. I walked toward the truck slowly, every step loud on the gravel. My keys were sitting on the driver's seat, just sitting there like someone had set them down carefully. I looked around. Nothing. No footprints, no movement. Just the sound of waves and wind. I reached for the keys, but something in the reflection of the window made me stop. In the glass behind me, I saw the cabin door slowly closing. I turned. Too late. The latch clicked from the inside. I ran back, grabbed the handle, yanked, locked. "Hey," I shouted, "open the door." From inside, the phone started ringing again. The old rotary bell screamed against the wind, over and over. I slammed the door with my shoulder, but it wouldn't budge. The window panes rattled, the sound of the bell never stopping. Finally, I stepped back, grabbed a log from the woodpile, and smashed the nearest window. Glass exploded inward. The phone stopped ringing. I climbed through. Inside, the fire was dead. The cabin smelled wrong. Musty, like mildew, and something sweeter underneath. I turned toward the phone. The receiver hung off the hook, swinging slowly. On the floor below it was something that hadn't been there before. A small Polaroid photograph. It showed the cabin's bedroom window from the outside, taken at night. In the photo, the curtains were open, and I was standing inside, holding the fire poker. The timestamp in the corner read 1:13 a.m. My hands went numb. That was after the phone call, after the voice told me not to turn off the light. I dropped the photo and backed away. Then I heard footsteps again, coming from the bedroom. Slow, careful, bare feet on old wood. I forced the door open, swung the poker up. Empty. The dresser I'd pushed against the window was still there, but the window itself was wide open, curtains fluttering in the salt wind. Outside in the sand below the bluff, a single figure was walking toward the dunes. He was barefoot, wearing dark clothes, shoulders hunched. I couldn't see his face, but his right hand hung at his side, holding something. A camera. He never looked back, just disappeared into the fog where the ocean met the land. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, sprinted to the truck, and drove until I hit cell service 30 miles inland. When I finally reached Kara again, she was crying. She said the cabin had been pulled from the rental site months ago, after a man who owned it before her had been arrested. His name was Miles Darren. He'd been renting the place out privately. Guests would stay a night, then vanish. Police found photos in his basement, hundreds of them, all taken from outside through cabin windows, dated over years. The last batch stopped in 2019, until a new set appeared in a box they hadn't cataloged yet. Those were stamped January 2022. Every photo was a me. If you've ever driven through northern Idaho in the dead of winter, you know how a road can feel alive, like it's waiting for you to make one small mistake. That was how the Dry Creek route felt, a narrow 2-lane mountain road that cut through frozen valleys, flanked by cliffs on one side and a bottomless drop on the other. I was 19 then, broke, and stupid enough to think danger was just part of the job. I worked for a delivery outfit based out of Spokane, a one-man truck, no radio contact, no GPS, and more miles than cents. We ran cheap hardware and industrial supplies between small towns, whatever paid by the pound. The company paid double for night hauls through Dry Creek Pass because of the risk: ice, fallen trees, or sometimes entire patches of road missing after a landslide. But double pay was double pay. That night, January 14th, 2018, I took the route alone. By the time I hit the mountains, it was just past midnight, and the world had turned into one continuous sheet of gray. Snow fell sideways. The truck heater couldn't keep up. Every few seconds, the wipers froze halfway through a pass, scraping against the windshield like nails. I remember thinking how quiet everything was when I turned off the radio. Just wind and the occasional rumble of ice breaking loose from the cliffs above. There were no other headlights for miles, No tire tracks ahead of me. About 20 minutes past marker 40, the road dropped into a valley. That's when I saw the bridge. It wasn't much, just a rusted steel span over a frozen creek. But my headlights hit something that didn't belong there. A pickup truck, dead center on the bridge. Its lights were off, engine running, and the driver's door hung open. I slowed, honked once, no movement. When I stepped out, the cold was so sharp it felt like breathing glass. The world was silent except for the hum of the idling engine. The snow on the bridge was freshly laid, undisturbed except for a single line of footprints leading away from the truck toward the railing. I called out, "You okay out there?" Nothing. The only light came from my own truck behind me, the beams cutting through the white haze. I stepped closer. Inside the cab was a half-eaten sandwich, a thermos still steaming, a phone plugged into the charger, screen glowing faintly. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, just that open door swaying in the wind. Then I saw it. A rope tied to the rear hitch, trailing down over the edge of the bridge. My stomach tightened. I walked to the railing and looked down. The rope disappeared into the black ice below, pulled taut by something heavy beneath the surface. I don't know why I called out again, maybe to prove there was someone to hear me. "Hey, you need help?" Still no reply, only the wind moaning through the steel beams. And then my truck's engine cut out. The headlights died, leaving only the weak yellow glow from the stranded pickup. For a few seconds there was nothing, no wind, no creak of metal, just that dead hum in my ears. Then, from the other end of the bridge, a shape appeared. A man, or at least the outline of one, standing perfectly still where the snow met the dark. I said, "Hey, did you break down?" He didn't move. I took a few steps toward him, squinting through the falling snow. He was tall, wearing a heavy coat with the hood pulled tight. When I got closer, the man finally spoke. His voice was calm, too calm. "Don't pull it up." I froze. "What?" He just turned away and started walking. Slow, deliberate, toward the far side of the bridge. That's when the rope jerked, hard enough that it knocked snow off the railing. The movement came from below, deep under the ice, something pulling against the rope from the other end. I stepped back, heart pounding. The man was still walking away, not looking back. I shouted, "Is someone down there?" No answer. The rope twitched again, then again, like something was fighting to reach the surface. I leaned over the railing, snow falling into my eyes, and followed the line of rope to where it vanished beneath the ice. For a second, I thought I saw air bubbles pushing up through the cracks. Then something moved. A pale hand. It pressed up against the underside of the ice, fingers spread wide, skin bluish-white. It pushed once, twice, then went still. I stumbled backward, slipped, and hit the deck of the bridge hard. When I looked up again, the hand was gone. But the rope was still moving, pulled slowly toward the middle of the creek, like it was being dragged. And then my truck's engine roared back to life on its own. Headlights blinding, radio blasting static. I scrambled to my feet, ran for the cab, and slammed the door shut. Through the windshield, I saw that figure one more time, standing at the opposite end of the bridge, still as stone. He turned his head just enough for the light to catch part of his face, and though the snow distorted everything, I swear he was smiling. Then he vanished into the dark. I floored the gas, tires spinning on the ice, fishtailing off the bridge until the headlights of the other truck disappeared behind me. I didn't stop until I hit the junction 20 miles south, heart pounding so loud it drowned the engine. I didn't look back once. I made it to the all-night diner in Bonner's Ferry just before 2 a.m. The place was empty except for a cook cleaning the grill and a single trucker half asleep over a cup of coffee. When I walked in, they both looked up like they could smell the panic coming off me. I told the cook there was a truck stuck out on Dry Creek Bridge with no driver in sight. He froze, rag still in his hand. "Where exactly?" he asked. "About 20 miles back. White pickup. Rope tied to the back. Something's under the ice." He shook his head slowly. "That bridge is supposed to be closed." By the time a deputy showed up, snow had started again. He was polite, quiet, Didn't laugh at me or call me crazy. He just asked me to ride along and show him where I'd seen it. We got there around 3:30. No lights on the bridge, no truck, no footprints except ours. The snow was smooth, untouched like nothing had ever been there. The deputy went down to the creek anyway, shining his light through the frozen surface. There were cracks, old ones, but no rope. No sign of anyone below. He came back up, brushing snow from his coat. "You're not the first one to call this in," he said quietly. "Same story almost every winter. Always at night. Always that bridge." I asked, "What happened the first time?" He hesitated, then said, "Tow driver named Cole Rayner. 3 years ago. Truck was found on the bridge, heater running, door open. He'd hooked a line to the hitch before he went over. I waited for him to finish, but he just stared at the road, snowflakes melting in his beard. They never found him," he said finally. But his partner swore he heard Cole say something right before the radio cut out. "What?" The deputy's flashlight beam slid along the railing, landing on a single spot where the frost was disturbed. A faint handprint, long since iced over. He said Cole told him, "Don't pull it up." We stood there for a long time, the wind moaning through the steel. Then the deputy's radio crackled. A woman's voice came through, thin and distorted. "Unit 5, copy. There's a truck reported abandoned on Dry Creek Bridge. White Ford pickup, lights off, engine running." We both turned toward the bridge. It was empty, but as the radio hissed in his hand, a glow began to spread across the ice below us, the pale sweep of headlights reflecting up through the frozen water. The deputy whispered, "That's not possible." The glow brightened, shifting like something moving beneath the ice. Then the sound came, faint, metallic, a rope dragging along steel. He stepped forward, gun drawn. "Stay here." I wanted to grab his arm, tell him not to, but I couldn't move. My legs felt cemented. He crossed the bridge slowly, his flashlight cutting thin beams through the snow. Halfway across, he stopped. There was someone standing at the other end, tall, hood pulled low, motionless. The deputy shouted, "Hey, you there?" The figure didn't respond. The beam of the flashlight wavered. "Cole?" the deputy said softly. The man lifted his arm, pointed down at the ice, and the rope snapped tight. The deputy fired once, the sound lost in the wind. Then he screamed. I saw the beam of his light whip upward, then disappear as he vanished over the side of the bridge. The rope went slack again. I ran. I don't remember driving back down the mountain. Just the feeling that something was behind me the whole way, following the taillights staying in the fog. They found the deputy's cruiser, parked at the turnout the next morning, engine running, radio still on. They never found him. 2 days later, the temperature rose enough that the creek ice started to thaw. A search team went out. They pulled up 2 bodies. The first was the deputy. The second was Cole Rayner, still wearing the same coat he'd vanished in 3 years earlier. His eyes were open, his lips were blue, and wrapped around his wrist was a piece of frayed rope, tied to the same hook they'd used to haul him out. The sheriff told me they'd found drag marks near the bridge, like someone else had come out after them. They asked if I'd seen anyone. I said no. But the truth is, I still see him sometimes. Every winter when the first snow hits and I drive past mile marker 40, there's always a figure standing at the edge of the bridge. Face hidden, arm raised, pointing down at the creek. Every single time the wind seems to whisper the same words. Calm, patient, practiced. Don't pull it up. The diner sat by itself on a stretch of US 97 so flat you could see headlights for 10 miles in either direction. A blinking neon sign buzzed over the gravel lot. Judy's Grill, open 24 hours. Though the second U had burned out months ago, leaving it to read Jody's. From the highway, it looked like a beacon, warm and safe. But up close, you could feel the emptiness behind the light. The desert wind pushed sand against the windows, and the sound of it never stopped. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, bleach, and fryer oil that hadn't been changed in too long. My name's Hannah Price, and I'd been working the graveyard shift there since the spring. There wasn't much else to do in this part of Oregon unless you liked washing dishes or sorting boxes in the Walmart warehouse over in Bend. The diner paid barely enough to keep the lights on in my apartment, but the tips from truckers made it worth it. I like the rhythm of the night shift, the slow hours between midnight and dawn when the world felt like it belonged to me. By 1 a.m., the highway turned silent except for the occasional set of passing headlights, and the only sounds inside came from the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft hiss of coffee brewing on the warmer. The regulars came and went. There was a local cop who stopped for pie twice a week, a couple of college kids driving back and forth between towns, and the usual string of truckers who were always polite, always tired, always gone by the next morning. I got used to faces that blurred together over time. Then one night, a man I didn't recognize walked in just before 1 a.m. He was tall, maybe early 40s, dressed neatly, dark jacket, pressed jeans, boots that looked expensive for this place. His hair was slicked back, his face clean-shaven. He didn't look like the others who stopped here. He slid into booth 6, the one near the window that faced the parking lot. When I came over with a menu, he smiled without showing teeth and said quietly, "Just coffee. And a slice of lemon pie, please." His voice was soft, calm, practiced. He kept his eyes on the window while I poured. When I brought the check, he had already set the exact amount, $5.75, on the table in a neat stack. He nodded, thanked me, and left without another word. The next night, he was back. Same time, same booth, same order. He didn't speak until I set the pie down, and then only to say, "Thank you, Hannah." The way he said my name made me pause. It wasn't on my tag. I'd taken it off earlier when the pin broke. I smiled and said, "Sure thing." But my stomach twisted a little as I walked away. He came again the following night, and the one after that. Always at the exact same time, 12:40 a.m. like clockwork. Richie, the cook, started joking about it. "You got yourself a fan," he'd tease from behind the grill. "Maybe he's writing a review column." I laughed it off, even pretended to enjoy the attention, but the truth was it made me uneasy. The man was polite, but there was something off in the way he watched everything. Not me exactly, just everything. The clock, the windows, the parking lot. He'd glance at the other tables as if memorizing their placement. Every night, he left right before closing. Then Richie took a week off to visit his sister in Eugene, and the diner was empty except for me. That first night alone, the silence felt heavier than usual, like the building itself was holding its breath. At 12:40, the bell over the door chimed, and I swear my skin went cold even before I turned. It was him, gray jacket, pale eyes, faint smile. "Evening," he said. I nodded, poured his coffee, and tried to keep my hands steady. He ate slow as usual, one bite at a time, eyes drifting toward the window. Every few minutes, he'd glance at the clock on the wall. When I wiped down the counter nearby, he spoke again, soft enough that I almost didn't hear. "You drive a blue Civic now." I froze, the rag halfway across the counter. The Civic was new. I'd bought it 4 days earlier, after my old car died. I hadn't told anyone except the bank clerk who helped me fill out the paperwork. "Yeah," I said carefully. "How'd you know that?" He looked at me for a long second, eyes so light they almost seemed colorless. "Just paying attention," he said. Then he took another bite of pie. That night, I parked directly under the lone streetlight outside, locked my car twice, and still kept checking my mirrors all the way home. The next evening, I called my manager and asked to swap shifts with someone else, but he brushed it off. Said we were short-staffed, and that the guy probably just liked routine. "Some folks get weird about their coffee time," he said. "As long as he's paying, don't worry." So I went back. When the man walked in that night, I tried to act normal. I greeted him, poured the coffee, smiled like nothing was wrong. But as I turned to leave, he said, "You shouldn't take 97 north tonight. They're working on the overpass." I stopped. The overpass had been closed since the afternoon after a semi flipped. They'd announced it on local radio, but my shift started at 10. I hadn't heard the update. "How'd you know that?" I asked. He met my eyes. "You take 97 north every night, don't you?" I lied. "No, I head south." He tilted his head slightly like he was weighing something, and then gave a small nod. "Good," he said. "Safer that way." He paid, exact change as always, but instead of leaving, he stayed in the booth. He didn't touch the coffee again, didn't even look outside. He just sat there, fingers folded neatly on the table, waiting. I busied myself cleaning, pretending not to notice. At 1:30, I finally told him, "We close for cleaning soon." He smiled faintly. "I know. You'll lock up at 2:15, same as always." I didn't answer. When I finally turned the deadbolt that night, I glanced through the glass door before switching off the lights. His car was parked at the far edge of the lot, engine idling, headlights off. I watched it for nearly a full minute, waiting for the beams to flash on for him to drive away. They never did. He didn't move until I was already on the highway heading home. The next 2 nights were worse. He came in earlier, around 12:20, and sat silently, his eyes tracking every step I took. At one point, I pretended to drop something just to get out of his line of sight. When I straightened up, he was looking directly at me. Friday night, the place was empty again except for the hum of the freezer and the flicker of the neon sign bleeding light across the tiles. My nerves were shot, but I couldn't afford to quit. I told myself I'd make it through one more shift, and then I'd find another job. Any job. At 12:40, the bell rang. He stepped in, same expression, same jacket. Only this time, he carried something. A plain brown envelope tucked under his arm. He ordered coffee, no pie. He didn't look out the window this time. He looked at me. I asked if everything was okay. He said, "You should take the night off tomorrow." My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "Why?" He didn't blink. "They'll find something off Highway 97 tomorrow morning. You don't want to see it." I tried to laugh, but my throat locked. "That's not funny." He smiled politely, like he hadn't said anything strange at all. "I'm not joking, Hannah." I took a step back. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but..." He interrupted softly. "I've seen what happens when people don't listen." The words hung there between us, quiet and final. Then he stood, left a $5 bill on the table, and walked out into the dark. The envelope stayed behind. I didn't open it at first. I told myself I'd throw it away. But curiosity is poison when fear mixes with it. I picked it up, unsealed it carefully, and slid out a single Polaroid photograph. It was a picture of my car, taken from behind in the parking lot outside my apartment. The photo was stamped with a date, that morning. I didn't sleep that morning. I sat on my couch with the photo lying on the coffee table, its edges curling slightly in the heat of the room. My blue Civic glowed faintly in the streetlight of the picture, and behind it, if you looked close enough, you could see a reflection in the rear window, a shape that could have been a person, maybe a trick of light, maybe not. At 9 a.m., I called my manager and said I was sick. He grumbled but let me off for the night. I tried to rest, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the diner, the booth, that calm expression. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even tell them? A man likes pie and knows too much about my life? They'd laugh. I tried convincing myself. He was harmless. Maybe some lonely trucker with too much time to watch. Maybe he'd move on. By evening, I'd almost started to believe it. The desert sunset painted everything copper. I made dinner, turned on the TV, tried to forget. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring out. It buzzed again. When I finally answered, the line was quiet except for the faint hiss of static. Then a man's voice said, soft and clear, "You weren't at work tonight." I hung up. 2 hours later, my building's security light flicked on outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw nothing but the empty lot. Still, I packed a bag and drove to the diner. It sounds insane, but that place, with its lights and locks and coffee smell, felt safer than my apartment. The desert was empty. When I pulled in, the neon sign buzzed lazily, the same flicker it always had. I parked under the lamp, keys ready in my fist, and hurried to the door. My hands shook so badly I dropped the key once before I managed to unlock it. Inside, the air was thick with heat that hadn't escaped since sunset. I turned on the fans and checked every booth. All empty. I brewed coffee just for something to do, something that made noise. The clock ticked to 12:40. The bell over the door didn't ring. I stood behind the counter and listened to the wind. 15 minutes passed, then 20. For the first time in weeks, he didn't come. I almost laughed in relief, until I noticed headlights slide across the far wall. A car pulled into the lot, engine idling. The shape of it wasn't his black sedan. This one was different. An old white pickup with one headlight blown. I relaxed a little. Probably a traveler. The door opened, and a man stepped in wearing a brown sheriff's jacket, older, weathered face, the look of someone who'd seen too many graveyards. "Ma'am," he said. "You Hannah Price?" My chest tightened. "Yeah." He tipped his hat slightly. "Sorry to bother you so late. We had a call about a vehicle registered in your name found up the road." My mouth went dry. "My car?" He nodded. "Blue Honda Civic, right? Abandoned just north of the overpass. Hood still warm." I blinked at him. "That's impossible. I drove it here." The deputy frowned. "Ma'am, it's sitting in the ditch right now." I glanced through the window. My car was right outside under the lamp, dusted in desert grit. Then whose? A faint chime cut me off. The doorbell over the entrance. Both of us turned. He was standing there. Gray jacket, pale eyes, the same faint, polite smile. In one hand, he held my car keys. "Evening, Hannah," he said. "You left your lights on." The deputy's hand went to his holster. "Sir, hold it right there." The man in gray looked at him as if surprised to see anyone else. "She called you," he said, almost disappointed. I whispered, "Don't let him leave." The deputy started. Forward. The man's smile widened just slightly. He set my keys on the counter, turned, and walked back toward the door. The deputy shouted, "Stop!" The man didn't. He stepped outside, calm as ever. I ran to the window. The lot was empty. No car, no footprints, nothing. The deputy radioed something I couldn't hear and went outside to check. I stayed behind the counter, trembling, staring at my keys glinting under the fluorescent lights. He came back 2 minutes later, face pale. "He's gone," he said, "and there aren't any tracks." He offered to follow me home in his cruiser. I refused. I didn't want to go anywhere near that empty apartment. I stayed till sunrise, cleaning, scrubbing, anything to stay busy. When the cook came in at 6, I quit on the spot. I drove home, locked the doors, and slept for the first time in 2 days. That afternoon, a call came from the county sheriff's office. They wanted to know if I could come identify something. I drove to the station expecting questions, maybe photos. Instead, they led me to the evidence room. On the table sat a manila envelope. "This was found this morning off Highway 97, the officer said, in a burned-out sedan, registered to a William Hensley, missing since 2015. Your name and address were inside." I told them I didn't know anyone by that name. The officer gave a strange look. There was also a picture. He slid it forward. It was another Polaroid. It showed the diner parking lot from above, maybe from the highway embankment. In the photo, I was standing outside the locked door last night, looking toward the light. Behind me, half hidden in shadow, was the man in the gray jacket. They said the picture had been taken less than 12 hours earlier. I drove home in daylight, too numb to think. The photo sat on the passenger seat, the paper already curling from heat. At the last intersection before my street, I stopped at a red light. In the mirror, a car turned behind me. Black sedan, clean. Exact same shape I'd seen every night for weeks. The light turned green. I drove faster. The car followed. I turned into my lot, jumped out, sprinted for the door. The sedan slowed, paused at the curb, then rolled away. I collapsed against the wall, shaking so hard I dropped my keys. I stayed there until the sun went down. When I finally found the courage to look outside again, the lot was empty. For 2 nights, nothing happened. I told myself it was over. Maybe the photo, the car, all of it was just some twisted prank by a stranger who finally lost interest. On the 3rd night, at 12:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without meaning to. The line crackled softly. Then his voice, low and steady. They found what I told you they would. I just wanted you to know you were right not to go north. I couldn't speak. He sighed. A sound almost gentle. You did listen, Hannah. That's good. Most people don't. Then a pause. You should look outside now. I did. Across the lot, parked under the same streetlight, sat my blue Civic. Engine running, headlights off. There was a photo tucked under the wiper. I walked toward it slowly, heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. The night was silent except for the hiss of the idling motor. When I reached the car, I lifted the photo with trembling fingers. It was another Polaroid. This one showed the inside of my apartment. The picture was taken from behind my couch, facing the coffee table where the first photo still lay. The timestamp was tomorrow's date. The Pacific Northwest looks peaceful from above. Endless green, rolling out in every direction, mountains cutting the horizon, rivers threading through pines like veins of silver. But after a few weeks alone in a fire tower, that peace starts to turn on you. The silence stops being silence. It starts breathing. I took the post at Hendrick Butte Fire Lookout in the summer of 2019. It sat 60 miles north of Yakima, Washington, high in the Cascades. The station was part of an old network built back in the 40s. Steel stairs, narrow deck, and a glass room at the top barely big enough for a cot, a stove, and the Osborne firefinder bolted to the center. You could see 100 miles on a clear day. Some rangers said it was heaven. Others said it felt like purgatory. For me, it was escape. I'd been a forest ranger for 8 years, but this was my first season working alone. My wife, Carla, had died in a wildfire 2 summers earlier. Wrong place, wrong wind. She'd been volunteering with an emergency medical crew near Mount Rainier when the winds shifted. They said it was instant. I never went to the memorial. I just stopped talking to people and signed up for the first solitary assignment I could get. I told myself I'd spend the summer clearing my head. No phones, no visitors, no news. Just me, the radio, and the smell of resin baking off the trees. The first few weeks went fine. I settled into a rhythm. Sunrise reports, weather checks, scanning the horizon for smoke every hour. The days were long, bright, and empty. At night, the forest glowed faintly from the heat trapped in the soil. When the air was still, you could hear pine cones crack open and drop like faint gunshots. It wasn't until late July that the calls started. It was a little after 2 a.m. when the radio crackled. Faint static, then a voice breaking through. Hendrick Butte, this is Tower 2. You seeing that glow east of Rock Creek? I sat up, heart kicking hard. I hadn't heard another tower call in weeks. Tower 2 was 20 miles south, but it had been decommissioned since 2012. The roof had collapsed. The road to it had washed out. I'd seen it myself on the way in, just a ruin of concrete and steel half swallowed by trees. I pressed the mic. Tower 2, this is Hendrick Butte. Repeat your message. Nothing but static. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I kept scanning the horizon. No glow, no smoke. Just endless forest breathing under a full moon. The next night, same time, 2:06 a.m. The voice came again. Hendrick Butte, I've got movement in Sector 7. Can you confirm? The line hissed, then went dead. By morning, I convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe another ranger on a private channel messing around. I filed my report anyway. Dispatch confirmed no active towers were using that frequency. 2 nights later, the call returned. You still there, Michael? My blood went cold. No one up here knew my first name. I turned down the volume and stared at the mic. The voice sounded calm, warm, a woman's voice. Who is this? I asked. Static hissed back. Then softly, it's Carla. I sat frozen. My wife's name. The voice was hers. I knew that cadence, that soft upward inflection at the end of each sentence. It was her. You need to stop, I said quietly. This isn't funny. You never said goodbye." The radio clicked dead. I didn't sleep that night either. By dawn, I checked the weather logs, the coordinates, the frequency, everything normal. I told myself exhaustion was making me hallucinate. Sleep deprivation does weird things when all you've got for company are trees and ghosts of your own memory. But by the 5th night, I'd stopped pretending it was fatigue. At exactly 2:06 a.m., the radio came to life again. "Michael, you need to get out. There's a flare-up near Rock Creek. I can see it." I jumped up, grabbed the binoculars, and scanned the eastern horizon. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then a faint orange blink shimmered near the ridge, like lightning without thunder. I grabbed the field phone, reported the coordinates. Dispatch confirmed no burns authorized in that area. They'd send a team to check it out at dawn. But when the crew arrived, they found nothing. No smoke, no tracks, no signs of fire. Later that day, my supervisor radioed in. "Everything okay up there, Hendrik Butte?" I lied. "Yeah, just a false alarm." He chuckled. "You'll get used to the quiet talking back." But the quiet didn't stop. It changed. Every night, the voice came. Sometimes static-filled, sometimes clear. She would tell me things no one else could know. The color of her old hiking jacket, the song we played at our wedding, the night we got stuck in the rain outside Forks. The memories felt real enough that I started leaving the radio on just to hear her breathe between transmissions. Then one night she said something new. "You missed one, Michael." I frowned. "Missed what?" "A column. South Slope. It's small, but it's moving fast." I leaned into the window. The sky was ink black, moonless. I swept the binoculars across the southern ridge. There, a faint orange flicker rising between trees. "Carla, I see it," I whispered before realizing what I'd just said. I radioed dispatch immediately. They confirmed a thermal anomaly had appeared on satellite minutes earlier. Fire crews were being sent in. At sunrise, I stepped out onto the deck. The air smelled of smoke and pine sap. Through the haze, I could see the blackened scar of the new burn. They said if I hadn't called it in when I did, it could have spread into the valley. When I went back inside, the radio crackled one last time that morning. "You did good," the voice said softly. "Now you can rest." I tried to answer, but the line went dead. For the next 2 nights, nothing. The silence felt heavier than ever. Then, on August 3rd, lightning struck the ridge directly across from my tower. A dry bolt that hit a dead cedar and sent sparks tumbling down the slope. I radioed it in, but no one answered. The storm had knocked out the main relay. I grabbed my binoculars and saw the glow spreading fast. By the time I packed my bag, the fire was already climbing. I tried the access road, blocked by a fallen pine. I was trapped. And then the radio came alive again. "Michael," my throat closed. "Carla, take the ravine path, the old one." I hesitated. "It's collapsed." "No, there's a gap, 30 yards west of the creek. You can make it." I didn't think. I just ran. Smoke rolled in waves across the trees, hot and oily. Ash fell like snow. Every step down the mountain felt like walking through an oven. I found the old trail, half buried, but still there. The air roared behind me as the ridge went up in flame. I reached the ravine and saw the gap, just wide enough to jump. I leapt. For a heartbeat, I felt nothing but air and heat. Then I hit the other side, hard, rolling into mud. When I turned back, the tower was gone, swallowed by a pillar of smoke. I made it to the valley floor by dawn, lungs burning, skin blistered. The fire had passed north. I collapsed near a ranger road too weak to stand. That's where the rescue team found me. They said if I'd waited 10 more minutes, I would have been trapped by the firestorm. No one could explain how I knew the ravine was still open. The map showed it as impassable since 2016. I told them someone on the radio gave me directions. They checked the logs. No other transmissions. But when I went back for my gear a week later, I found something half buried in the ashes near where the tower had stood. A melted handheld transceiver, the kind rangers used before the modern system. Its serial number was worn away, except for one scratched word etched into the casing, Carla. When they released me from the hospital in Yakima, I told everyone I was fine, but the truth was I couldn't stand silence anymore. The doctors said I had mild smoke inhalation, second-degree burns on my forearm, and a concussion. They gave me 2 weeks rest before an evaluation to return to duty. I spent those 2 weeks in a motel, staring at the television with the volume turned up just to drown out the phantom static I kept hearing in the walls. Every time a truck passed outside, I thought it was the sound of wind against the glass of the tower. Sometimes at night, I dreamed I was back there, standing at the radio, Carla's voice whispering through the speaker, telling me which way to run. I'd wake drenched in sweat, convinced that if I turned on the radio, she'd answer. The agency called the fire an act of God. They credited my quick report for saving nearly 40 square miles of forest and the small town downwind. They called me a hero in the papers, but I didn't feel like one. I felt like a man who'd been handed one last message from someone who should have been gone. A month later, the supervisor asked if I wanted a temporary desk post for the rest of the season. I said no, I wanted to go back up. I didn't tell him why, I just needed to see the mountain again. When I returned to the site, the air still smelled faintly of smoke. The tower was a skeleton of steel, warped and blackened. The lookout logbook had survived in a weatherproof case, though the pages were brittle with soot. I opened it, hoping to see proof that someone else had made those calls, some signature, some mark, but all the pages after July 24th were blank. Still, I kept coming back. I spent the next 3 weeks working with recovery crews clearing debris. It was strange. While most of them complained about the heat and the long days, I felt calm up there. The forest was still scarred, but the first shoots of green were pushing up through the ash. The mountain was healing itself, 1 inch at a time. On my last day, I decided to hike down alone before sunset. The others were staying another night, but I wanted to reach the road before dark. The trail was quiet except for the low drone of insects and the occasional rattle of dry pine needles under my boots. The ravine where I jumped during the fire looked smaller now, just a black gash with a thin stream running through it. I stopped to rest there. That's when I heard it. A faint voice behind me carried on the wind. "Michael?" I froze. For a second I thought my mind was playing tricks again. Then I heard it clearer. A woman shouting from somewhere above. "Help! Down here!" It wasn't Carla's voice. It was younger, terrified, real. I scrambled up the slope, calling out. The smoke had cleared weeks ago, but the terrain was still a maze of charred trunks and loose stone. I followed the sound until I saw movement, a flash of red between the stumps. A girl, maybe 20, half buried in a collapsed section of trail, one leg pinned under a burned log. She was shaking, coughing, her face streaked with soot. "Please," she gasped. "My radio's dead. I've been here since last night." I pulled the log aside with everything I had left, dragged her free, checked for breaks. Her ankle was swollen, but she could move. I gave her my water and asked her name. "Rachel," she said, still trembling. "I was on the trail above." The fire came back. When she saw my ranger badge, she burst into tears. I thought no one would find me. I called it in on my portable, but the signal was patchy. The dispatcher only caught fragments. I told her to hang on and wrapped her leg with my bandana. As I helped her walk down toward the valley, she looked up at me and said, "Someone was calling your name last night on the radio. I thought you'd already heard me." I stopped cold. "You heard a voice?" She nodded weakly. "Yeah, a woman. Said your name 3 times. Then she told me to stay put, that help was coming." For a moment, the world went perfectly still. The wind, the trees, even the insects. Just the rush of blood in my ears. When the rescue team finally met us at the forest road, Rachel was crying with relief. The medics took her, thanked me, asked how I knew where to look. I told them, a voice on the old frequency. They smiled politely, assuming I meant a ranger relay. I stayed until they loaded her into the ambulance. When she waved, her sleeve slipped, and I noticed something faint on her wrist. A pink rubber band tied twice around like the ones Carla used to wear to hold her hair back. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and waved back. That night, I drove to the overlook above the valley. The stars were bright enough to see the shape of the mountains, black silhouettes against the sky. The forest below shimmered with tiny pockets of new growth, glints of green pushing through the ash like fireflies frozen mid-spark. I turned off the truck engine, stepped out into the quiet, and listened. The static that had haunted my ears for weeks was gone. The air was warm, full of life again. And then, just for a heartbeat, I heard it. Not a transmission, not even words, just a single gentle breath through the wind, the sound of a woman exhaling. "You did good," I whispered into the dark. "Goodbye, Carla." The wind moved through the trees, soft and forgiving. I stood there until the horizon paled, and the first light of dawn spilled over the mountains. The fire had taken everything, but it had given me something back too, a reason to keep living, a second chance. When I drove down the mountain that morning, the world looked different. The Pacific Northwest stretched out before me, green, endless, and alive again. I started working for the Marion County Highway Department the year after my divorce, mostly because it was the only job that didn't ask for references or explanations. The pay wasn't good, but the work was steady. Fixing potholes, clearing branches, resetting flood barricades when the Santiam River spilled over the banks. Out there, nobody asked where you came from. They just handed you a shovel and pointed. The town of Parane's Crossing sat in a low valley cut through with side roads and culverts. When the winter rain came, half the fields went under, and the locals would shrug like it was just part of the deal. "You can't live in the Pacific Northwest and hate the water," my foreman Dale liked to say. But the water that pooled around Parane's Crossing wasn't just inconvenient. It was alive in the worst way. It had a smell to it, heavy and metallic, like blood left too long in a bucket. The first time I noticed something off was during a night inspection. The county kept a 2 a.m. shift rotation whenever storms hit, mostly to check barricades at low crossings. I'd been given the stretch near Miller Creek Bridge, a narrow, crumbling 2-lane strip that dipped low enough to submerge a car if the river rose more than 2 feet. It was late February, rain hammering down hard enough to blur the road lines. My headlights cut through mist, and the trees looked like black bones. As I came around the last bend, I hit the brakes. There was a car half submerged at the crossing, an old silver sedan, nose down in the runoff, water already lapping at the hood. I radioed it in to dispatch. "Vehicle at Miller Creek, partially underwater, looks empty. I'm pulling over." Static hissed, then a bored voice answered. "Copy that. Probably another drifter. Tow trucks on standby, just mark it and move on." That was standard. Flood season brought plenty of idiots who thought they could beat the barricades, but as I stepped out with my flashlight, I realized the driver's door was wide open. And through the sheet of rain, I could see the interior lights still flickering. I waited closer. The current was slow but heavy. The water reached my knees before I could lean over the door. Inside, the seats were soaked, and the dashboard was still glowing faintly. A phone sat in the cup holder. Screen cracked, camera lens shattered. The keys were still in the ignition. I shone the beam deeper. That's when I saw it. The driver's seatbelt was still buckled, and under the surface, something pale floated near the steering wheel, limp as cloth. I stumbled back. "Dispatch, I need a coroner out here," I said, but the radio only spat static. By the time the sheriff's unit arrived, a single car driven by Deputy Carr, the rain had eased into mist. They pulled the sedan out with a tow cable, and sure enough, there was a man inside. Middle-aged flannel shirt, wallet still in his pocket. They zipped him up without ceremony and told me to get some rest. When I came back the next morning, the car was gone. Not to the impound lot, not to the county yard. Gone. The sheriff's report listed it as processed. No photos, no paperwork. That might have been the end of it. Another nameless accident swallowed by the floodplain. If it hadn't happened again 2 nights later. Same crossing, same make of car. Only this time, The driver's license I pulled from the glove box belonged to a man who died in Perrin's Crossing 5 years earlier. At first, I thought it was a clerical mix-up. Small towns, recycled plates, maybe even Vine numbers. But the more I checked, the stranger it got. The registration was current, the insurance active, the odometer reading almost identical to the last one. I brought it up to Dale over coffee the next morning. "You ever notice the same kind of wrecks at Miller Creek?" He gave me a flat look. "We don't ask questions about Miller Creek, son. We just keep the road open." I pressed him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, eyes fixed on his mug. "Means the water takes what it wants. Always has." That night, I went back alone. No storm this time, just the low hum of frogs and wind through reeds. The barricade signs leaned sideways, half sunk in mud. I parked upstream and walked down with my flashlight, boots sinking with every step. The smell hit first, that same sour, metallic stink, stronger now, like a slaughterhouse drain. The creek was low, glassy, still. But there in the shallows, I saw the outline of another vehicle. Same silver sedan, half buried in silt. I splashed forward, heart pounding. It was wedged against a branch, the rear window shattered. Something about it looked off, too clean, like it hadn't been there long. When I reached the trunk, I saw a White County sticker peeling off the bumper. Highway Department property. Our own tow trucks used those stickers. My stomach turned. I followed the creek down another 50 yards, where the current curved around a concrete culvert. There, stacked against the bank, were two more vehicles, both stripped of plates, both marked with faint white rectangles where stickers had been scraped off. And in the mud between them, I saw something glinting. A tag. A metal toe tag. The name etched on it wasn't the driver's from last week. It was Deputy Carr. I stumbled back toward the truck, splashing through mud. I called Dale, voice shaking. "You need to come down here right now. There's bodies, cars, our equipment." He cut me off. "You saw more cars?" "Yeah." A pause. Then quietly, "Then you need to go home, son. Now." The line went dead. I looked back toward the creek. The current had started to move again, slow but steady, swallowing the edges of the nearest bumper. The water was rising. When I climbed into my truck, the radio crackled to life. Not the handheld, but the one wired into the dash. A man's voice, calm and familiar. "Miller Creek's clear. You can open the road." I froze. It was Dale's voice, but I hadn't keyed the mic, and I was the only one on this channel. Outside, the water kept climbing. By dawn, Miller Creek Bridge was gone, washed out completely, as if the river had decided to erase the evidence itself. By sunrise, every local station was running the same headline. Bridge collapse at Miller Creek. No injuries reported. No mention of the cars. No mention of the bodies. I drove past the site anyway, half expecting to see state crews or forensic vans, but the road was blocked by two brand new barricades with flood hazard, closed until further notice printed across the front. Behind them, heavy machinery was already rolling through mud, dumping gravel into the hole where the bridge used to be. Dale's truck was parked off to the side. When he saw me, he shook his head slow like he'd been expecting this. "You're off the rotation, son," he said. "Take the week. We'll call you when we've got a new sector." "I'm not leaving," I said. "There were bodies in those cars. You know it." He looked away, jaw working. "That creek eats everything. You dig too deep, you get swallowed same as them." Before I could answer, two men in plain clothes came down from the worksite. One tall, one heavy-set, both carrying clipboards. No logos, no ID tags. They talked to Dale for less than a minute, then walked straight to my truck. "You're with Highway?" the tall one asked. "Yeah." He nodded toward the badge on my chest. "Appreciate you staying out of restricted zones. County's assessing structural damage. Lot of liability down there." "Then why aren't the sheriff's people here?" I asked. He smiled like I'd said something childish. "Because it's a bridge, not a crime scene." Then he reached into his jacket and handed me a folded sheet of paper. "Sign this. Just a statement confirming you were on site for safety inspection only." The page was blank except for a single line at the bottom. Signature of county employee. I didn't sign. He gave me the kind of look that makes your stomach tighten. Suit yourself, but you should know you're on overtime paperwork that hasn't cleared yet. Wouldn't want a payroll glitch keeping you from getting paid. They left. Dale didn't meet my eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't just neglect. It was ritual. Something everyone in Perrin's Crossing knew about and learned to pretend wasn't happening. That night, I drove to the diner on Highway 22, the only place open past midnight. The waitress, Ruth, slid a mug of coffee my way. She was older, had been working there longer than most of the county had been alive. "You look like hell," she said. "Been worse." "Bridge business." I froze. "How'd you—" She nodded toward the newspaper stand near the door. "It's always the bridge. Has been since before I was born." I leaned in. "You know what's happening out there." She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Floodplain insurance. County gets paid out every year. New bridge, new contracts. Every time it washes out, money flows in. But it only pays if there's loss of life involved. Always has to be someone on record. Only one, though. Never two. That's the rule." My skin went cold. "You're saying they plan it?" She shrugged. "They don't plan the rain, just the paperwork. Then the people in those cars are listed as weather fatalities," she said softly. "Just like last time. And the time before." I sat back, dizzy. Why keep using the same spot? "Because the river doesn't argue," she said. "It takes what it's told to." I didn't sleep that night. The sound of rain against the motel window felt heavier now, like it carried whispers in it. Around 3 a.m., I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and drove back to the barricades. The county crews were gone. The machines, too. The only light came from the reflection of my headlights against the water. The bridge was nothing now, just a gap filled with black current. But as I stepped closer, I noticed something snagged against a half-buried branch downstream. I waded in, the mud sucking at my boots, the current stronger than I expected. It was a white sheet of plastic. County issue. A vehicle incident report, half-soaked but legible. I lifted it into the beam of my flashlight. Name of deceased Ethan Dale. Occupation, highway maintenance supervisor. Date of death, March 4th. Cause, accidental drowning, flooded crossing. My breath stopped. That was today's date. Before I could move, I heard a splash upstream, faint but deliberate. I turned the light, saw ripples spreading across the surface. Then another splash, closer. Something heavy shifting just beneath the waterline. I backed toward the truck, my boots filled with icy water, my pulse hammering. The sound came again, this time from the bank beside me. A shadow rose out of the reeds, rain slicking its coat. It was Dale, or what used to be Dale. His eyes were open, unfocused, his skin gray under the flashlight beam. He was standing waist-deep in the current. "Bridge is clear," he said flatly, voice bubbling through water. "You can open the road." I stumbled backward, slipped in mud, scrambled into the cab and slammed the door. The engine barely turned over, the tires spinning before catching traction. As I drove, my radio came alive. First static, then a dozen voices overlapping. "Floodplain clear. Bridge is open. All accounted for." Then silence. I didn't stop until the lights of Salem came into view. I parked in front of the sheriff's office, marched in, and told the deputy on duty everything. The cars, the bodies, the false reports. He listened quietly, then nodded. "We'll file a statement. Wait here." He stepped into the back office. Through the glass, I could see him talking to someone. A man in a gray suit, clipboard in hand. When the deputy came back, he handed me a sheet of paper. "Just confirm the details at the bottom." It was the same form the tall man had given me before, blank except for a line marked "Signature of County Employee." I set the pen down. "I'm not signing anything." He smiled politely. "You already did." I looked down. My name was there, my signature, dated and printed in black ink. I left. I didn't go back to Perrin's Crossing, not that week, not ever. That was 3 years ago. Every winter since, I've checked the county flood reports out of habit. And every March, there's always one name listed. A worker, a tourist, a local teen. Always one. Last night, I opened the file again. A new report had been added. Flood incident, Miller Creek Crossing. Deceased, unknown highway worker. Vehicle, county truck, ID 374C1. Declared total loss. I froze. That was my old truck. The one they issued me my first week on the job. The photo attached showed it half submerged in muddy water, headlights still burning through the fog. And behind it, if you look close enough, you could see a figure in the current, holding a clipboard, watching the road. I started managing the Kensington Arms the first week of October. The rain had already settled in by then, turning the sidewalks slick and green, the kind of mossy damp that never really dries. The building sat on a corner off S.E. Belmont. 4 stories of tired red brick, cracked windows, and tenants who paid cash on the first and called every other day about leaks that would never be fixed. I didn't ask why they hired me. The regional manager said the last property supervisor had taken medical leave. No one used the word fired, but the tone said enough. The building had been standing since the 1940s, back when Portland was all rail yards and mills. The basement was built for coal storage, later converted to laundry, then sealed off when they found mold and asbestos. The tenants called it the lungs. There were 23 occupied units on record. My job was simple: collect rent, log maintenance, and keep renovation inspectors out until the new ownership finalized permits. They were rebranding the place as affordable housing, which usually meant they'd evict everyone, slap on gray paint, and double the rent. The first week was uneventful. I met most of the residents, retirees, baristas, a couple of night shift nurses. A man in 1B kept pigeons on his balcony. A woman in 3C sold handmade soaps in the lobby on weekends. Everyone seemed normal, if tired. Then came the noise complaint. It was a Tuesday, around midnight. The tenant in 2D, a grad student named Allison, called, whispering like she was afraid of being overheard. "Someone's moving furniture in the basement," she said. "It's shaking the pipes. My ceiling fan's rattling." I told her that couldn't be possible. The basement had been sealed for years. There was only one entrance, a heavy steel door in the laundry room, welded shut. "Then why can I hear it?" she asked. I told her I'd check in the morning. By morning, the sound had stopped. But when I went down to the laundry room, the smell hit first: damp concrete, dust, and something faintly sweet, like mildew mixed with rot. The weld on the basement door wasn't broken, but the paint around it was fresh, the same dull tan as the hall walls. Someone had repainted it recently, the brushstrokes still visible. That afternoon, I dug through the tenant files in the office. The folders were ancient, yellow pages, handwritten forms, rent ledgers scrawled in pencil. That's when I noticed the duplication. There were 2 leases for Unit 2D, both listed Allison Hart. Same signature, same move-in date, but the first was from April, the second from August. The April file included a photocopy of her driver's license and a maintenance ticket for a leaky faucet, signed by me. Except I hadn't worked there in April. I thought maybe it was a filing mistake. I checked Unit 1B next. 2 leases again, both under different names but same handwriting. Then Unit 3C, same pattern. Every apartment had 2 tenant files, one old, one new, each mirroring the other, with identical handwriting in the margins. And every old lease ended with the same final entry: vacated, transfer to basement unit. But the building had no basement apartments. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain drummed against my window, and the walls seemed to pulse with it. Around 2 a.m. I heard a dull thud, once, then again, from beneath the floorboards. I went to the hallway, barefoot, flashlight in hand. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old metal. The noise came again, deeper this time, from below the laundry room. I pushed open the door. The floor tiles were damp. The steel basement door stood exactly as before, welded shut. But something new gleamed under the seam. a thin black trickle of water. Or at least I thought it was water until the beam of my flashlight hit it just right. It wasn't clear. It was thick, reddish. I backed away, heart pounding, and shut the door. In the morning, the hall smelled normal again. Detergent, coffee, the musty scent of wet coats. The door looked untouched. I started asking questions casually, testing the tenants. Ever hear anything weird at night? You know anything about the basement? Most brushed it off, except for the old man in 4A, Mr. Dempsey. He'd lived there since the 1970s. He just smiled thinly and said, "You'll get used to it. The building keeps its own schedule." When I pressed him, he added, "Every few months, it trades places. That's why they never tear it down. Too many names on file." Then he looked at me like he'd already said too much. That weekend, I called the regional office. A receptionist answered. "Hey, this is Miles Carter, property manager for Kensington Arms. I'm reviewing the tenant records. Something's off. A lot of duplicate files." She paused. "Carter?" "Yeah." "Hang on." Papers shuffled. When she came back, her tone had changed. "Sir, we don't have anyone by that name listed for that property. Our records show a Michael Harris as current manager." I stared at the phone. "That's not possible. I started 2 weeks ago." She sighed. "I'll escalate it to corporate." Before I could respond, the line clicked dead. That night, I went back to the basement door. I don't know what I expected. Maybe fresh paint, maybe nothing at all. But the weld was gone. Someone had cut it clean. I pushed the door open. It groaned like something exhaling. A single bulb flickered below, casting yellow light across concrete steps. The smell that rose up was unmistakable this time. Old water, rust, and rot. I descended slowly, flashlight shaking in my hand. The staircase opened into a corridor lined with pipes, each dripping in rhythm. The floor was slick with condensation, and there, at the end of the hall, were 6 identical gray doors. Each had a brass number plate, B1, through B6, and beneath every number, a small plastic slot for tenant names. Only B3 had a card inserted. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. The card read, Carter, M, Unit Manager. I stood there for a long time, staring at that brass card. Carter, M, Unit Manager, trying to make sense of it. The paper was fresh, edges still crisp, like someone had slid it into the slot just hours ago. When I reached out and touched it, my name was written in a hand that wasn't mine. The air in the basement felt thick, wet, like the whole building was exhaling through the concrete. The pipes rattled once and then went still. Somewhere farther down the corridor, water dripped in an even rhythm. I tried the knob on B3. It turned. The room was small, no windows, low ceiling, walls sweating with moisture. In the center sat a folding table stacked with files, and on top of the pile, a manila folder labeled Incident Carter, M. I opened it. Inside were copies of maintenance reports, rent ledgers, even my own hiring form, all stamped closed in red. At the bottom was a single line typed in bold, transfer approved, basement occupancy confirmed. Something scuttled behind the boiler. I spun, light slicing across the far wall, and saw the outline of someone crouched near the pipes. "Who's there?" My voice came out smaller than I meant. A man stepped into the light. I recognized him from the tenant files. The previous property manager, the one who'd taken medical leave. His skin was pale, almost gray, his coveralls soaked to the knees. He looked at me like someone studying their reflection. "You're early," he said softly. "What are you talking about?" He nodded toward the table. "It always starts with the records, then the noises, then the duplicate lease." "Where is everyone?" I asked. "What's down here?" He smiled weakly. "Names. That's all the building ever wanted. Once it has your name, it doesn't need you topside anymore." He gestured toward the other doors. "Go ahead, open them. See who's left." I hesitated, then crossed to B1. Inside were stacks of file boxes, each labeled with unit numbers. Photos clipped to folders showed every tenant I'd met, their faces blurred, eyes smudged gray by moisture. In the corner, an old typewriter sat on a metal desk. Its platen held a half-typed lease. New tenant Carter, miles date of move-in. Pending behind me, the previous manager whispered, "Once it writes you in, it writes someone else out." A metallic bang echoed overhead, the building's pipes clanging like a heartbeat. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The lights flickered. I turned back to him. "We can burn this. We can stop it." He shook his head. "You can't burn what keeps you alive. The tenants pay rent with their names. You think the city still owns this building? The records are older than the city." The ground trembled, faint but steady, as if something massive was shifting in the foundation. Water began to leak through the seams in the walls, first in thin threads, then in steady rivulets. I grabbed the folder, the typewriter, anything with my name on it, and ran up the stairs. The stairwell felt longer than before. Every step slick, every breath thick with mold. By the time I reached the laundry room, the lights were strobing. I slammed the door behind me and shoved a dryer in front of it. The air upstairs was no better. Warm, humid, humming. The entire building vibrated like it was alive. When I reached the office, the filing cabinet drawers were open. Every folder that had been on the shelves downstairs was now there, perfectly dry. But the labels had changed. Every name had been replaced with Carter, M. My phone buzzed on the desk, a call from regional management. I answered. A woman's voice said, "Mr. Carter, we're confirming receipt of your vacancy report. Please leave keys with the new manager before end of day." "What new manager?" A pause. Then, "It's already been filed. Position filled." Static filled the line. Somewhere below, the dryer stopped spinning. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The city outside was muffled, pale. I packed a duffel with whatever I could grab and carried it down to the boiler room. I didn't trust doors anymore, so I brought a hammer. The steel door to the basement was warped now, pulsing slightly, moisture bleeding through the paint. I tore my nameplate off it and hurled it into the drain. Then I opened the valve on the main gas line, the one tagged "Do Not Touch." The hiss filled the hallway. I dropped a lighter onto the floor and turned away before it sparked. The explosion shook the block. Windows shattered up the stairwell, glass raining across the lobby. When the smoke cleared, the Kensington Arms was a shell of blackened brick. The roof had collapsed inward, water from the sprinklers hissing against the fire. They said later it was a gas leak. No one questioned it. Buildings in that part of Portland go up all the time. That was 6 months ago. I rent a room outside Corvallis now. Pay cash, no lease, no name on the mailbox. I don't give ID when I can help it. Last week, a letter showed up under my door. No stamp, no return address. Just one line written in block capitals. Unit available. Basement level. Manager preferred. I didn't open it. I burned it in the sink and watched the paper curl, blacken, and vanish. For the first time in months, I thought maybe I was finally free. But last night when I walked past the laundromat on Main Street, I heard it. Deep under the floorboards, faint but steady. The sound of pipes breathing. And when I looked through the glass, I saw a metal door at the back wall. Fresh paint, tan color. On it, a small brass plate. Carter, M, Unit Manager. The Columbia River Gorge is the kind of place that convinces you the world can't possibly belong to people. Even in daylight, the cliffs dwarf everything. Concrete highways look like toy tracks, trucks like ants, and the river like a blade of steel pressed between walls of green-black stone. At night, though, the place turns into something else entirely. You don't see the river so much as feel it. A low vibration under your boots, endless and alive. That's where they built Floodlight Station 9, a string of high-intensity lamps mounted along the highway tunnel between Tanner Creek and Eagle Creek. The lights ran all night, every night cutting through the fog and rain so the maintenance crews could monitor for rock slides. When I got the job, I was just looking to survive another winter. I'd been laid off from a mill job in Hood River, behind on rent, barely seeing my son except on weekends. The Department of Transportation was hiring night electricians, hazard pay included, and I didn't ask questions beyond that. There were 5 of us assigned to Station 9. Dale, the senior tech, a quiet man who'd worked every corner of the gorge since the 90s. Marquez, the generator specialist, the only one who still laughed after midnight. Leah Grant, a temp from Eugene, with hands that always shook but eyes that never missed a reading. Eddie Boone, a new hire who'd done 2 seasons on Avalanche Cruise in Stevens Pass. And me, Sam Nolan, line electrician, 3rd rotation. Our base was a prefab trailer wedged under the east bluff. Inside, the walls sweated from the constant mist. The heater hummed, and a single fluorescent bulb buzzed like a trapped hornet. Every 30 minutes, we logged readings from the floodlight banks, checking lumens, voltage, and weather. There was a binder for it. A green one with DOT stamped on the cover. Dale called it the Bible. It was supposed to be easy work, just cold, wet, and endless. The first few weeks were routine. We took turns stepping outside to record data, smoked in the lee of the truck, drank burnt coffee, complained about pay. The gorge rain never stopped, a kind of fine mist that soaked through everything. Sometimes, when the fog rolled off the river, the lights would refract into perfect spheres, hanging like floating moons across the asphalt. Beautiful, in a lonely sort of way. Then, about a month in, I started noticing the logbook. The thing was meticulous. Handwriting too neat to be human, perfect spacing, never a missed entry. It went back years, decades. Even during power outages or mudslides, every half hour was accounted for, without a single gap. One night, I flipped to the earliest pages and saw an entry dated February 2001, signed S. Nolan. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even been out of high school then. When I showed it to Dale, he just frowned. "The records are copied over from the old system," he said. "Clerical thing. Don't read into it." But his voice didn't sound sure. November came early that year, a wall of rain and wind that slammed the gorge for weeks. Trees bent sideways, trucks hydroplaned around the curves. One night, near midnight, the entire floodlight array flickered. Every lamp dimmed, then surged bright enough to turn the fog white. Leah was on the meter run with Eddie when it happened. The rest of us watched through the trailer window, the floodlights strobing like lightning. Then, just as quickly, they stabilized. I grabbed the radio. "Leah, come in. Everything good out there?" Static. Then a voice I couldn't place, low, calm, almost mechanical. "Copy that. Lumen steady. Recording complete." It didn't sound like Leah. When we went to check, they were gone. No footprints past the guardrail, no gear, no tire marks. Just their clipboard, lying open on the road, ink smudged by rain. By dawn, we filed the report. Headquarters told us to monitor conditions. No replacement crew, no investigation. The logbook, though, it had new entries. 12:10 a.m., L. Grant. 12:30 a.m., E. Boone. Perfect handwriting, fresh ink. Marquez stared at the page, face pale. "Maybe Dale wrote it to keep the schedule clean," he whispered. Dale shook his head slowly. I didn't. We stayed silent for a long time, listening to the wind batter the trailer walls. Over the next week, everything blurred into routine again. Dot didn't call back. No one mentioned Leah or Eddie. We just kept working. The binder stayed on the desk, green cover closed, humming faintly like it was absorbing sound. On the 10th night after they disappeared, the floodlights pulsed again. One long blink, synchronized across all banks. I glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. That was the exact time of the last recorded entry in the log. I told myself it was coincidence, a voltage surge. But when I checked the panel, every circuit was perfect. No faults, no flickers. When I came back to the trailer, Dale was sitting at the table with the binder open. "You see this?" he asked. Someone had already written a new line. 3 a.m. S. Nolan. My name. My handwriting. I hadn't touched the pen. I didn't sleep that morning. None of us did. Marquez sat staring at the river through the fogged window until sunrise. Dale paced the trailer, mumbling numbers. Dates, names, coordinates. When the sun came up, we stepped outside. The light looked wrong, gray instead of white, heavy like smoke. And there, above the tunnel, the floodlights blinked again. This time, they didn't go back on. For the first time in 20 years, Station 9 went dark. We waited for the radio call from dispatch. Nothing. We tried calling HQ. Static. The road was empty for miles in both directions. Then, through the fog, we saw figures near the turnout. 3 of them, walking in perfect rhythm, side by side. Their vests reflected white under the dead lights. Dale whispered, "Leah." But when I raised my flashlight, they vanished. The only thing left was the gleam of wet asphalt. We went back inside. The heater had stopped humming. The logbook was open again, another line written at the bottom, 4:00 a.m. Crew rotation complete, no names. Just those words. That was the last full shift we worked together. The next night, Dale didn't show up. Then Marquez. I drove the 2-lane highway alone, headlights cutting through fog so dense it looked solid. When I reached the turnout, the trailer lights were already on. The door was open. The binder lay on the table, turned to a fresh page. I looked down. 11:30 p.m. S. Nolan, lead. 12:00 a.m. D. Carter, new hire. I didn't know any Carter. The pen was still warm. By the time the second week started, I'd stopped turning the heater on. The trailer's hum made me think of breathing. Slow, mechanical, patient. I didn't like giving the place rhythm. The new name in the logbook, D. Carter, kept showing up. Perfect half-hour intervals. No one new ever walked through the door. On Tuesday night, I drove out alone. The gorge road was empty. No taillights, no trucks. Just fog thick enough to eat my high beams. When I reached Station 9, the floodlights were already burning. Not steady white anymore, each one pulsing faintly, as if syncing with a heartbeat I couldn't hear. Inside the trailer, the binder waited open to a blank page. The clock ticked 11:30 p.m. I told myself I'd close the place down for good. Cut the generator, call HQ from town, let someone else deal with this mess. But the console crackled before I could touch the switch. Floodlight 9, confirm output. The voice wasn't dispatch. It was the same flat tone I'd heard the night Leah vanished. Who is this? Static then. Confirm output. Schedule must continue. The radio light turned from green to amber. My stomach tightened. Outside, rain hissed against the metal siding, building to a steady roar. I stepped out, hood up, flashlight in hand. The wind hit like ice. Every lamp along the tunnel shimmered through the fog, cutting pale corridors into the dark. When I reached the midpoint, lamp E4, the one where Leah and Eddie had disappeared, the ground vibrated beneath my boots. There was a hatch there, bolted and half buried under gravel. I'd never noticed it before. The bolts were new. I knelt and brushed away the grit. Faint lettering was etched into the steel. Sub-level access. Authorized personnel only. I should have turned back. Instead, I pulled the wrench from my belt. The hatch opened onto a staircase descending straight into blackness. Cold air rose up, sharp with ozone and rust. I followed the steps down, counting each one until the river's roar faded into a low mechanical hum. At the bottom, a tunnel stretched toward the bluff. Concrete walls slick with condensation, lined with conduit pipes feeding back toward the floodlights above. The hum grew louder the deeper I went, merging with the steady click of relays switching somewhere unseen. And then I heard it. The faint sound of a pen scratching paper. Around the next bend, a small room glowed with fluorescent light. A desk, a single chair, the green binder. Someone sat with their back to me, writing slowly. Their vest was orange, reflective. Their hair, short, dark, wet. Dale. The hand kept moving. When I stepped closer, the figure froze. The pen rolled from his fingers. He turned just enough for the light to touch his face. It wasn't Dale. It wasn't anyone I recognized. But his eyes were mine. Every detail. Same scar above the eyebrow, same stubble, same split knuckle from fixing the generator 2 nights ago. He looked at me with calm pity and said, Shift rotation complete. The room shuddered. The floodlights overhead roared to full brightness, bleeding through the concrete. I don't remember running, but I must have. I woke hours later in my truck at the overlook above Bonneville, sunrise cutting through the mist. My clothes stank of ozone. My hands were streaked with graphite, like I'd been writing for hours. When I drove back to Station 9, the access road was gone. Landslide, at least that's what the county notice said. The trailer had been removed, the ground bulldozed clean. But that night, when I stopped at the diner in Cascade Locks, the TV over the counter was tuned to local news. The anchor was reading from a short piece about routine maintenance upgrades at Floodlight Station 9. Behind him was footage of a new crew standing by the tunnel, reflective vests bright in the drizzle. One of them looked up at the camera. I saw my own face again, tired, expressionless, raising a clipboard, signing something. The caption below read, Crew Lead, S. Nolan, Oregon DOT Night Division. I quit the next day. Moved east of the Cascades, somewhere the rain didn't reach as much. But every few months, driving past a construction site at night, I'll see those same floodlights burning through the fog, perfectly spaced, perfectly timed. Last week, heading toward Spokane, I passed another tunnel project. Sign on the chain link fence read, Pacific Northwest Infrastructure Project, Floodlight Station 10. A worker waved as I slowed. Even from the cab, I could see his face. He looked just like me.